Awesome. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out for this. I know that we are near the end of the conference, so I appreciate everybody coming out for this, especially today. Super excited to be talking about all this stuff today. So I'll give a quick introduction. My name's Ryan Canuel. I run Petrichor. We're a XR game development studio. We're based in the Boston area, and we've been in business since around 2015. Our current project is a mixed reality game we're working with Oculus Publishing on, and it's called Mythic Realms. It's going to be coming out later this year. And we've been trying to design and think about games in the emerging platform space since we started the company. One of our first projects was for Google Cardboard. And we've been really excited and interested in sort of changes and trends in where games were going. So I'm super excited to be talking about that today. And especially the goal of this is, for a lot of people who are starting on a game project today, you're probably embarking on a 2 or 3 year development cycle, and these platforms change and update things and shift fairly frequently as you work on your title. And so there's often the case where you might make these assumptions and launch, and there's been things that have changed under you, or you didn't plan ahead properly for changes that were going to happen in the space. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is basically strategies that people like to use when they're looking ahead and working on projects to try to predict what's coming. So with that being said, I'd like to give everyone else here a chance to introduce themselves. Vickie, we can start with you.
Great, it's exciting to be here. My name is Vickie Nauman, and I work in music. So I sit in between the music industry and the tech industry. I have my own company, and so I work with quite a few different companies who are, gaming companies, new tech platforms, emerging, technologies like generative AI, and I help them kind of understand what, a company will come to me and say, we want to do X with music, and then I help them figure out a business model, how to do things right and legally with music rights, and bring things to market.
Great. My name is Ben Taylor. I've been working for Square Enix, leading XR initiatives for the last 5.5 years in Japan. My background is in games and actually making immersive spatial experiences for about 20 years, working in Electronic Arts and Nexon and Hasbro and other companies like that. And I'm just happy to share my opinions here. Again, they're my opinions. They don't necessarily reflect the views of Square Enix, but happy to answer your questions and give you any insights I can. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is David Gino. I work for the Venture Reality Fund. We look for early stage pre-seed startups focusing in XR, as well as advising for several companies in the startup space. One is XR Bootcamp. It's the largest developer resource for building in XR. I recommend everyone check out the community. It's pretty awesome.
Awesome. So I want to start just flat out with the initial question that we had around when you're planning and you're developing for a new platform. So I'm curious for all of you, when you're looking at a new project or you're trying to assess sort of where things are changing within the market, what are some of the tools and tricks and ways that you like to go about trying to see kind of what's coming and how trends are going to be changing?
Great, I'll take that one. So I think from my point of view, right now I look at platforms and also their features. Right now, how many of you here are game developers? Raise your hand. Okay, out of all the game developers, how many of you have published a game like on App Lab or on the store? Okay, so you guys will get this. So, Meta, of course, is doing a lot to help this community, and they're also put the money where their mouth is, right? So you've heard of the Lifestyle Accelerator program that they do. They also have the Ignition Publishing program. They also have the START program. And these programs are to help developers in XR transition from traditional 2D into 3D. But one thing that developers need to understand, there are certain features that are going to be announced on the roadmap. For example, let's just use mixed reality in the Presence platform, where you're using the cameras to actually see your outside world, and then to augment that to make it really awesome with digital content. Well, there's new features that are coming out that that they're going to focus on, right? Why mixed reality? Well, it brings, first of all, you're not isolated from the world, and you can also start benefiting your real life by learning how to play the piano, playing the drums, maybe even cooking. So there's things that are lifestyle oriented for a lot of game developers out there. You have to think of the audience of who they're trying to sell to, right? And so if Meta's saying, hey, we think there's this big value of getting normies into XR, what are they doing? Because a way a company like Meta thinks, you got to think that they have to understand how big is the total addressable market that they can reach as consumers so they can sell through that product. Because they just want to sell headsets. So they're looking for all of you here as developers and builders to build that. So those are things that I tend to give advice for a lot of developers. Look at product roadmaps of different companies and figure out what makes sense for you and how do you capitalize on it to be the best you could be on that platform.
That's an awesome point.
On my side, I mean, I work in music, and so music is always the first whenever there's new technology. And the reason music is always first is because it is fantastic for platform adoption, because artists bring fans, and fans follow wherever music is, and it makes your platform culturally relevant and personal when you have music in it. But it's, we go through these waves all the time, with live streaming and, all the Web3 things, gaming, virtual worlds. And so all these companies are just, they're trying to innovate and doing things with music. And so I'm always in a state of kind of evaluating patterns, seeing patterns across how companies are building. And one of the things that is, of course, very challenging with music, the other side to that sword, is there's all these complicated music rights. And so there's always there's some companies that just do not have an appetite. They just want music to be free of copyright and just running through their platforms, and they don't want to build systems. They don't want to bother to license. I feel like, well, it usually doesn't end well for those companies. So I'm always looking at, who's built features that are right for music? Who's willing to, engage and do things right, do things legally, and how can we bring artists and fans together inside of a platform in a meaningful, scalable way? And that, once you apply those criteria to new companies or new technologies, it whittles things down pretty quickly. And, but I think that we're in a really exciting time because artists, labels, publishers, everybody wants to be more experiential with their fans. And so it's really just a matter of kind of sorting through and matchmaking a lot of times.
That's great. Yeah, I definitely mirror that idea that fans should be at the core of those sort of experiences. Obviously, the one aspect of your business that you should lean on and can be sort of a guarantee that something you're going to develop is going to hit is making sure that you're meeting the expectation of your existing customers, if you have existing customers, right? Or understanding what that target is so that you can meet their expectations. I think that for me is the most important thing. And that's a learned quality because I have an inventor, product developer background in computer science, and I'm very enamored with the technology. I always want to create experiences that best highlight the value of the technology, the unique affordances of the technology. But if it's not something that is going to resonate with that core customer, it's just going to be a waste of time anyway, right? So take that core technology, the thing you're passionate about, make sure you meet the passions of your existing customers.
That's an awesome segue into something that we were just talking about before this, which was, and Ben, for you directly, so for us, a lot of people might not know this, but Square Enix actually has probably among the most successful, if not one of the most successful, augmented reality game in Dragon Quest Walk, and a lot of people aren't necessarily familiar about that. Do you want to tell people about that?
That's actually a really good question. How many people here are familiar with Dragon Quest or Dragon Quest Walk? A few, just maybe a couple of hands came up here. Dragon Quest is one of Japan's biggest fantasy RPG brands. If you watch the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, that beautiful music that was playing was actually the Dragon Quest theme. I mean, this is really just an incredible fantasy brand that's available worldwide. Please do check it out. But like what Ryan was saying, we actually released a game just in the Japan market called Dragon Quest Walk, and it's still played intensely today. These are not official numbers, but if you check online with like Sensor Tower, for example, you'll see reported there that made something like $86 million in its first month and around $2 billion cumulative revenue over its lifetime. So that number, those sort of numbers may be worth being on your radar. And I would encourage you to, consider the global market, consider that, the play space that's available to you might not just be America. There might be an audience out there that's passionate about things other than what you're hearing about every day and the trends that are resonating at conferences like this. We need to do everything we can to ground ourselves in reality, understand what regular people want. And again, I think going back to the fans and understanding what your core demo is looking for, design with empathy.
Yeah. And one of the things also that I love about Ben is that actually Ben is who introduced me to my first ever VR experience at the Boston Festival of Indie Games many, many years ago, where Ben actually had me make out with an alien in VR. And that's all I'm going to say about it. I'll let Ben tell you more about that experience.
I'm sorry for sucking up all the air, but yes, I'm a big fan of game jams and hackathons. I've been doing them for decades. And yes, I participated in one where Oculus, they brought the DK2 hardware to Boston and had a game jam. And DK2, if you're familiar with this hardware, was the first one that allowed you to translate spatially like this. It was in just 6DoF, right? So it's like, man, what would be a good experience for this? And I was lucky to be part of an incredible team with just visionary leaders like Mike Mandel, Sean Witt, my wife, Dawn Rivers at the time, now Dawn Taylor. And we developed this multi-mouth alien kissing game where you have to sort of lock lips and target the mouth. It was just really insane. At Boston Festival of Indie Games, we made a kissing booth where we wired it up so that when you locked lips, they would light up. And it got a lot of eyes on it. Are you familiar with PewDiePie on YouTube? PewDiePie did a video of it prior to that event and Boston Festival of Indie Games, and it got like 4 or 5 million views in the first day or two. Yeah, and then Comedy Central's At Midnight show. I don't think it's airing anymore, but it was featured on that television show as well. So funny little thing. I think it's great to experiment with new technologies and use them on the side. And it was a great opportunity for me to get to use this technology, sort of a little XR boot camp experience, and work inside of Harmonix Music Systems office right in Cambridge, which is this legendary creators of rock band company. Many of the names I just mentioned, Mike Mandela was originally at that company. And it's just finding that intersection between technology and that demographic is really critical, especially when you have some sort of core like music at the core of that experience. So yeah, it was a great experience. I'm so glad that I was able to introduce you.
And that alien still has not returned my phone call. But speaking of music, so that's actually a really great segue into, so for Vickie, when looking at licensing music, and especially like for emerging platforms and emerging trends, what are some of the things that you're seeing in the audio world right now that you see kind of as emerging and interesting that like developers here could look at?
Yeah, absolutely. Music is, we're kind of in this, I would say we're like on the cusp of a post-streaming world, meaning streaming's not going anywhere, but, Spotify, Apple Music, having access to anything in YouTube, it's kind of, it's like it's plateauing in the North America and Western markets. There's a passiveness to music in these platforms where you're kind of listening to music while you're cooking and driving and whatnot. And there's unmet needs with both the fans and the artists to engage more. And so that is a great opportunity for things like VR, virtual worlds, all sorts of things where music is in the foreground, and that a lot of it resides around artists and fans connecting. And music used to kind of be like cool culture, and then there was nerd culture and gaming, and these things are just completely the same. That Venn diagram is now largely completely overlapped, and that's so exciting because there are all these artists, musical artists, who are gamers, and they want to do more than just play games. They want their music into games. But I think one of the things that's a challenge is some of the things that you were talking about of really getting that right with fans. And when you have like a Spotify or an Apple Music where you've got 100 million songs and you're just putting everything out to everyone and you say, let the fans figure out what they want. That's very different than when you have a game and you're trying to curate the right music for that game. One of the games that I work with, and I have worked with since the early stages, is Beat Saber, a VR game. And we spend a ton of time really thinking through what is the right artist, what is the right regional appeal, is the music rhythmic enough, do we have the right, can we beat map 5 different levels and make it consistent and great for gameplay. But a lot of times, companies that don't go through that and they just think, oh, we have gamers and we're going to put this music in. If they get it wrong, it's like scarring. And I think you have to really understand your demographic with music. If you have a Discord server, that's a great place to ask people what kind of music they want, what they would like to see, because there's just a cultural aspect to getting the right music for the right demographic. And I worked with one company that they put a DJ in who was a gamer, but he was a very big commercial DJ, and the fans hated it. They were like, how dare you? You don't know us at all. Like, how could you insult us by putting this commercial DJ in? We're an underground gaming community. And that company could never get out of its way to do anything else with music because they were so scarred that they got it wrong. But I feel like, the shortcut is to ask the gamers and ask people what kind of music they like. But it is a really, really important step when you're considering putting music in a game.
Yeah. All right. So for David, I have a question around AI. And specifically, like, AI is a really broad topic, right? So are there specific things within AI that you're excited about how it applies to XR, or specific parts of AI that you'd say, like, these are the things that I'm really excited about right now?
Yeah, AI is such a broad topic, and of course with LLMs and prompting, we have a whole new definition or way we are actually interacting with AI. But I really do believe that voice input and understanding inflections and emotions is a new paradigm of how to interact with games. I mean, just like in real life, we talk to people, we have conversations, we learn. Those type of aspects should happen in a simulation, right? In terms of game development, I'm really excited. I don't think we're at the stage where a game designer is going to be done by ChatGPT, or a CEO of a game company will be an AI in any near future. But I do believe for game development, they can be used as a tool. There's a company called LiveAware that helps you transcript all of your gameplay sessions. So whether you're in QA or your product manager, it also scrapes YouTube and then gives you transcripts of what players are saying about your game and then summarizes it. If you work in game development is a loop. You do a lot of prototyping, you do a lot of testing, and then you get the feedback and figure out how you can actually increase the quality of the prototypes. And it's an endless loop until you get the game right. That's a hard, arduous process, but that's the only way you can get the feeling of the game to be right. And so using AI tools like what I just mentioned help with that production to be more efficient and time-saving, which ends up being more money for the developers in the end. Yeah,
that's good. Although I'm sad to hear that as a CEO, I won't be able to just like do everything myself with AI.
Yeah.
One of the things, kind of as like an open question again for everybody. So there's the looking ahead at the emerging markets, and one of the things when you're looking ahead and you're making predictions about the space, sometimes you're wrong about those predictions. Not anyone up here we've never been wrong about, but on occasion, sometimes you'll be wrong about something. And so when you're a team and you're looking ahead and you've made some sort of an assessment about, okay, well, we think that this space is going to be a good space for us to develop in, and you went down the wrong track, are there ways that you would recommend kind of course correcting from that? Or ways that when you're starting a project, you might be able to avoid that? And I'll give just one kind of quick example for ourselves. We signed and we're working on a project for Google Stadia. And so if anyone remembers Google Stadia, it's not around anymore.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. And so at the time, when we were working on it, we were really excited about it, and there was a lot of really impressive components to Google Stadia as a product, like the fact that you could watch a YouTube video for your game, click a button, and instantly go and just start playing it. We were like, wow, that's awesome. Like that is groundbreaking. That's going to change a lot of things. We were really excited about it. Every time we talked to anyone from the team, like the team at Google Stadia was awesome. They were all completely bought in on that. They were really behind it. And unfortunately, it didn't work out, and we were midway through development on that title when we found out that Google Stadia was shutting down. And so that was something where we were able to quickly try to pivot and launch that game on Steam. And I think part of it was, well, we tried to architect the game in a way where we weren't completely dependent on Google Stadia for everything. It was built in Unity. We could deploy cross-platform. And so we had something salvageable where we were like, all right, we can still launch this thing somewhere. We've put a lot of time and energy and resources into this product rather than just scrap it and try to move on. And having that in our portfolio of work was still important to us, and I think it's important to any development team to have launch titles that you can hang your hat on. And so for us, that's one thing, is like, just launch it. Even if sort of the floor falls out from under you, if there are ways that you can get that game out somewhere else, it's really important just to have that. But I'll open up the question to all of you as well. Are there any other bits of advice that you would give to teams?
Well, definitely on music. One of the problems that happens with music is when you license music, you license according to functionality. So you're like, this music is going to be integrated into a game, and this is how it's used. And so it has a specific set of functionality. Maybe there's monetization associated with it. Maybe there's not monetization associated with it. But all of those things get baked into a licensing deal. And then there's a lot of other things that can happen that will change, where maybe in between the time that you decided to do this, there's another game or something else that has been created, and you're like, oh God, that really works. We should integrate that, and we should do that over here. If your license deals are too narrow, then you can't necessarily do that. You have to go back to everybody, and you have to disclose to them, we licensed A, but we want to do B. And then sometimes the rights holders will say, well, then that's additional functionality, then you need to pay us more money. And so I think that, the moral of the story here with music is it is a constraint in your development. It's a constraint in your functionality, and it's really important at the early stages, even if you're thinking about music and you're like, we're not going to go to market for, till the end of 2025. Talk to people who know music and know functionality and know how licensing works at the early stage, so that you can kind of have your developers understand what those constraints are, and then you kind of build a strategy around how you're going to license the music that has enough flexibility in it, so that if you decide that you want to change something 6 months in, that you are not then stuck with something that you can't modify. And I think the monetization is a really important one. If it's just functionality, you can usually get that without additional money. If you say, oh, now we're going to, let people who play this part of this game with music earn points, and then they get to turn those points into buying the music, or having an emote that's got the music in it, like that's a really, really major change from a rights holder standpoint. So, kind of thinking through different permutations early on, I think, is really important, even before you get the music licensing done.
So you would recommend to developers, like, make sure you kind of know what your systems are going to be and how you want your game before you go and start approaching licensors?
Absolutely, and I also always recommend, never talk to a label or a publisher unless you know what you are doing and what you want to offer them. If you go in and you don't know that, and you're like, oh, we want to put the music in the game, and you let them determine how much it costs or what the offer is, you will not get a good deal. And so you really want to think all of these things through. And many people in the gaming world, the worst thing is also that like you've come up with something great, and then somebody says, well, you can't do that. That's that breaches trust with the game developers. And I feel like that's another thing of like, if you tell developers early on, these things are okay, innovate within these guardrails, then you're not kind of creating a block later down the road where you have to tell someone, no rights holders are going to let you, break their song into stems and remix it and let users monetize it and distribute it out on Spotify. I'm sorry, but that's a huge rat's nest. But if you do these things and not that, then you can move things forward.
Go ahead, Ben.
Okay. My answer really requires a sort of a split in scale. So I would say that on a smaller scale studio, when the rug gets pulled out from under you, right? I mirror your advice, which is find a way to get it out. You need that win. You need to try to make a win out of it in some way. But of course, if you're at a larger scale, if you're a multinational company or something like that, and you're working with major brands, I've worked on many Disney brands, Star Wars, Marvel, things like this. It's going to get to a point where it might not be worth it to put it out, if the rug has been pulled out from under you, because you really have to think about the hit that it could do on those major established IPs. It's all about keeping that value. But yeah, from a smaller scale, I would say, hustle, get it out there, try to do that. And I think there's always a lot of opportunities. My one unhappy element to add to that as a caveat is that if your product can succeed without that core technology as part of it, if we're talking about technology, then was it a product that was crafted to take advantage of the technology critically?
Yeah.
Right? So, these larger companies, they're going to have to hedge their bets. Maybe multi-platform, maybe something like that, if you're talking about the hundreds of millions of dollars of development. And for that reason, it's a bit risky to even be in the opportunity that the technology could be pulled out from under you.
So as the kind of counterpoint to that, I guess, then the thing that you'd really recommend development teams would be to make sure you really look at why are we using this technology? How is it critical to the importance of this product before going and starting to build it? Is like, make sure you have a good answer to that question so that when you're not, midway through or close to launch, you're scratching your heads going, well, wait a second, we didn't need to make this in VR. We could have just made this a Steam game.
If that's possible,
Yeah.
if that's the conclusion people make, then you're in trouble, right? We're at an XR conference right now. If it's not highlighting, if it's not like XR's at least a highlight of the experience where it's better in that format, right? I think you might be in trouble. But I think that as a technologist, I wanted to highlight the special affordances of the technology. As a sensible business person, cover your butt.
I think, and something you said is also so applicable to music, which you're talking about when you're part of a corporate, you have a huge IP brand, that increases your risk. Same thing with music. If you're a young game or an early game, don't go for Travis Scott and Taylor Swift and the biggest artists in the world, because the expectations will be that whatever you do has to be a resounding success. Work with smaller artists in the early stages, figure out what works, figure out if your monetization and all your assumptions are if they're accurate, and then you go to the big artists, but don't start there.
Great advice.
So the recommendation that I have for a lot of you that are game developers working in a niche industry like XR that hasn't broken the barrier, which I think 30 million is still a healthy audience, so you can make really compelling products, so you can make a ton of money, is quit often. And that just means like while you're building it, mirroring everything that you said, if it's not spatial and utilizing that whole feeling of being in a third dimension, and it's not feeling right, quit. prototype it. If it doesn't work, move on to the next thing. You know, I talk to so many talented developers that they just still want to prove out a hypothesis or thesis that it's just not only draining a lot of energy and time, but you've gone through the rounds of testing it, doing all the right things, QAing it, and if you're not getting that feedback, just pivot. It'll save you a lot of grief. I've been through it even personally myself, but also hearing the horror story from developers who are looking for investment, just remember that. Don't be married to anything. Just keep progressing, listening to the audience feedback, and building better prototypes.
That sunken cost fallacy is a bane of many game developers.
Yes.
So, let's see. All right. So, one more question for you, Vickie. In terms of like when, when a team is specifically like working on an emerging platform, is there any advice that you would give them for how they're looking at implementing audio or licensing audio for like an emerging product or something that's in kind of a new or interesting space?
Yeah, I mean, I always, and this is hard because I know this is a lot of insider information, and if you are not on the inside of the music industry, a lot of what I'm saying is like, well, that's interesting, but how would I know that? Is there are certain labels and artists and publishers and stakeholders in the industry who have a specific interest in being first. And, and engaging with new technologies and putting their artists, showing, like a lot of, even major labels now, they're hearing from artists that they want to do more in this space. And so they want to demonstrate that they're enabling that. And so but there are others that are really, really rigid. They don't want to take any risks. They're of a mindset, we took all the risks signing these artists and developing artists, so now we take 0 risks in anything else that we do. And they're not the right ones. And I'm a huge fan of self-selection in the music business, because you go around and, and it is crazy. Like I do deals all the time for gaming companies, and I'll go to, a label and say, hey, we have, 10,000 aside, which is 10,000 for the master, 10,000 for the publishing. Here's this game. It's really interesting. Do you want in? They're like, no, it's got to be 50. Okay, thank you. Next. Hi, I have 10,000 aside. It's a really interesting game you're in. Yes, great. Okay, perfect. Great. Let's engage. Let's figure out what your artist wants to do. And you really want to find, especially in these emerging platforms, you really want to find artists who want to be first and who want to be out there and who embrace the technology. Because the music business does not have a great reputation for being, open to technology, and it is getting better, but they used to just want to put the toothpaste back in the tube all the time, and and there's been a lot of progress made. But I think the other thing is, is to also look at some of these emerging platforms and see, have they done things wrong with music? Like, in the early stages with Roblox, they had a $200 million settlement with music industry because they didn't do things right. And you also kind of like, there were a lot of developers in the early days of when Roblox was really trying to engage with music that their ideas died on the vine, and it wasn't because of their idea. It was because at that point in time, many labels and publishers hated Roblox, so they would just say no to everything. And so kind of, like with music, it adds this X factor of complexity, but if you get music right, there's really nothing else like it in terms of engagement. And so, if you don't have an expert on your team, find someone and, have someone help you make those decisions, because not all early stage platforms do things right with music, and then you get all tangled up.
Yeah, that's great advice. Don't get sued.
Yes.
Yeah. So, David, when you, looking at changes in the XR space, and when you're looking at investments, are there, looking ahead, do you see some shifts and changes in how investment in XR happens? And second to that, if you're a team today that you're looking to get investment in XR, what advice would you have for those folks?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, as you all know, AI has sucked all the air in terms of like in tech interest, just turn on the news or, also it happens also with venture. However, the venture reality fund is a little bit different. We don't sign the biggest check sizes. What we do is actually cultivate you to be successful in this industry so you can either make a successful exit or just make a ton of money. Just be based on our LPs and our resources, and we've been in around the space probably the longest for what we do. But the advice that I have is, look, if you want to make an XR experience, the average team size, you can make something kick-ass with the time frame given and also the complexities of XR. You're looking at about 3 to 5 person team. Keep it slim, right? Even Alchemy Labs, who got sold off to Google, which we were also part of, at their height, they're about 30 people. Compared to like a AAA game on traditional consoles or mobiles, it can run up into the thousands, right? So burn rate is really key. Second is really understand the principles of game design. Like what we look for is the 3 C's: camera, character, and controls. And in XR, those things mean differently from a 2D screen. You really have to figure out how to finesse it so those 3 things are really important to the experience of XR. And speak that language of understanding why it's different and look at your competitors. How are they doing it and how can you differentiate yourself? But the advice that I love to give is like, hey, I'm looking for unicorns, man. And we all know unicorns don't exist. But how can you be that unicorn killer to figure out, hey, look, I figured out a genre and I can really capitalize on it to just really dominate this market? Because that gives me a clear path while I'm doing a demo with you to really understand what your goals are and how you're going to be able to do it. And then I kind of do a background math check of how big that market might be, and then how much, at the end of the funnel, who are those serviceable that I'm going to talk to that are interested in games and XR.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's great. I think that is fantastic advice, especially being lean. And I feel like so many companies, they have a vision and they just, they raise some money and they immediately want to have this huge team. And it's really counterintuitive because you really want to be lean, you want to be nimble, you want, especially now in the fundraising environment, you want to stretch that money as far as possible. The investors have gone from, scale at all costs to you need a viable business model to you need revenue. And so, if you have a huge team, you can't make those leaps very easily.
Yeah.
100%. And the bar is different in terms of the graphic quality, the expectations in XR. So just remember, it's really about the feeling and the mechanic. And 100%. You don't need a huge team. Don't be too ambitious. Do it with what you can.
Yeah. And all right, I want to make sure that we have some time for one or two questions. But Ben, I did want to ask also for you from kind of like a tech director's perspective, right? When you're looking at innovations and changes within tech, what are some of the things that you feel like are most important when it comes to helping shape XR and helping like the XR space continue to grow?
Yeah, for me, it's all about onboarding. So reducing the friction into the experience. And when I say into the experience, I mean from initial discovery that even exists into getting it up and running and interacting in the experience, right? What is that journey that the customer has to make? Like I mentioned earlier, I used to work at Hasbro developing Disney products for Marvel and Star Wars and Disney Princess and things like that. And I would be in a room with a kid and a very technologically inept parent, right, who has no patience for what's going on, right? And I would have to get them, using this connected toy, this technology toy, maybe it's connected via Bluetooth Low Energy or something, to a game on a tablet, right? Like, for example, there was something I worked in called Lightsaber Academy, Star Wars Lightsaber Academy, where you would train with Yoda and different Jedi and Sith masters to find your way in the Force, right? But can you imagine this lightsaber connecting to an iPad and getting, a 5-year-old to a 7-year-old into this experience? And they desperately want to do it. So the tolerance level is very low. So many times when I'm developing products for XR, I see them wanting to desperately do it, especially if you did a good job marketing the product, right? So it's not only incumbent on you as a software developer to try to get that up to a point and reduce that friction, but also you're up against the hardware developer, Meta and all of these companies, you have to put their amount of time for onboarding, IPD configuration on the Vision Pro, right? All of that is adding to your onboarding journey. So we, as a collective XR industry, in every area that we can, I believe, need to reduce friction in the onboarding process.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right. So I think we've got time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. I'd love to open up if anyone has any questions.
Hey, Frederick at Weird. So basically, I was asking, this is for Vickie, would you suggest actually working with sync licensing, like companies to work with games, or if you're a music artist directly and you publish your own stuff, master your own stuff, would you just, do you think you'd go through sync licensing or just go straight to the game developers themselves?
I mean, it really, the gaming industry is so diverse, and it's similar to the music industry where there's a handful of huge, AAA game developers, and then there's this enormous mid and long tail. And so unless I think it's always good to figure out if you're a musician, you have music, where would your music fit? First of all. So, can you identify 5 or 10 games that you think your music would be great for? And then there are, there's sync agents, and, some of them are better. A lot of them have been set up for film and TV and not necessarily games, and games is totally different license deals, totally different structure, totally different relationships. And then, so I think it's worth thinking about representation. And then I think there's also some smaller companies, startups, that are trying to make music and games easier. And so, getting your music into those and figuring out, what is going to work and trying to get your music into as many of these platforms as possible. And if you do own your rights and you control your master and your publishing, if you write everything, if you are on ASCAP and BMI, you can do a lot to be flexible with gaming companies. If you have 10 writers and you have a shared master or you sign to a label, you're not going to be able to do as much. But in this space, it's really an advantage to be completely independent and be able to have control over everything.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
If I can add on to that, from a Japan perspective, it's a very relationship-based, reputation-based environment where it could be in your interest to partner up with somebody who has a strong, established reputation in the Japanese market. So thinking about that leverage, if you independently have a strong reputation, you can leverage that in that particular market.
I see 1 minute left. It's a shotgun question from Ted.
Got you, Ryan. So crafting tomorrow's products means crafting for the next generation of consumers. Are there any touch points you can provide for game developers and experience creators from a technical standpoint, just what you're seeing, or an investment standpoint, as well as what is actually gathering interest from money?
I'll just quickly say I'm a big proponent of skeuomorphism. So the idea that the natural interactions we do in regular life are naturally suited for XR. So that removes the need, not necessarily completely, but for you to train them on a UI or novel interface, which was my job at Hasbro.
Yeah, I think from an investment standpoint, I think everyone here wants the holodeck. So that's the North Star. Where are the incremental things that need to happen to get to the holodeck?
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much. I'm seeing the flashing lights. This was an awesome panel. Thank you everyone for coming out.